We have four very qualified, interesting women here to speak with you. They're going to offer their own personal experiences working abroad and stories. So, Dr. Kelly, just introduce them.
Sorry. Well, welcome everyone again. My name is Mary Kelly, and it's my pleasure to be moderating this breakout session. What I'd like to do at the beginning is to very briefly introduce each of our panelists and then turn it over to them to basically kind of fill in the dots from a bio perspective on their career and specifically their time abroad, the challenges that presented to each of you by working abroad. I always want to say study abroad because I'm so used to advising students, but working abroad. And then we'll just open it up to questions that you might have to our panelists. So let me begin. Joanne Maughan, who I actually have the pleasure of having her son in class his freshman year, has been with Ingersoll Rand since 1982. Her current role, Director of Strategic Finance Initiatives, has her as a key member of the Mergers, Acquisition, and Divestiture team. An area of Ingersoll Rand has been quite active in the last 10 years. She has participated in the divestiture of businesses worth over $8 billion and acquisitions of businesses totaling over $10 billion. She has served as the company's expert accounting representative in litigation hearings and arbitration disputes. Prior to joining Ingersoll Rand, Joanne began her career with Ernst & Young and worked in the New York and Raleigh, North Carolina offices. When she resigned, Joanne was a senior manager with several large Fortune 500 clients. She is active in the E&Y Alumni Association. She holds her bachelor's degree in accounting from Queens College, part of the City of New York University system. She is a certified public accountant and member of the AICPA and the New York Society of CPAs and the Financial Executive Institute. Roseann is the Global Head of Investor Solutions Sales Support and the Vice President with Barclays Capital. The Investor Solutions Sales Support team manages sales assistant functions and oversees operational processes for Investor Solutions sales and primarily distributes structured products in addition to cash products and OTC derivatives. Prior to joining Barclays, Joanne spent 4 years at Bloomberg as a structured product data specialist in the new issues department. She held positions at Prudential Investments in the Mutual Fund Services Department and at Summit Bank in retail banking. She received her BA in economics at Rutgers University. Andrea is an assurance senior manager with Ernst & Young. Andrea is a certified public accountant and has her master's degree in accounting from the University of Virginia. Her other professional affiliations include the AICPA and PICPA. And you'll talk about your experience over in Munich. And lastly, Teresa is director in PricewaterhouseCoopers Human Resource Accounting Advisory Practice in Philadelphia. She assists clients and personnel in better understanding the financial accounting and auditing implications of benefits and compensation-related issues. Prior to her current role, Teresa spent over 18 years auditing international and domestic companies. She received her BS in accountancy from Villanova University and a certified public accountant. So with that, those introductions, again, we're thrilled that you're here at Villanova. Again, if you could fill in the dots from a bio perspective on your career and then specifically on your experiences abroad, the challenges that they presented. We'll start.
I'll start if you'd like. As Dr. Kelly said, my name is Joanne Maughan, and I do work on mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures, and actually that's what has taken me overseas. When we've done acquisitions overseas, I've gone over, spent a significant amount of time bringing them into line into our reporting systems, our accounting systems. I've headed up a team, done purchase accounting, which I'm sure is something that is an advanced accounting and not quite something everybody wants to do, but it is very interesting. The last place I spent 3 months in Italy. I was in a town called Faenza, which was outside Bologna. So it has taken me in a lot of different places. On the divestiture side, in the last few years, Actually, in 2007, I probably did about $6 billion worth of divestitures. $5 billion on one deal and about $1.5 billion on the other deal that I did. One was to a Swedish company that a lot of you might know. It's called Volvo. And the other deal for about $5 billion was to Doosan, which is a Korean company. It's interesting how different parts of the world treat you differently, especially as a woman in business. In Europe, it doesn't matter. It's like here in the States. You know, you can go around, people treat you, they talk to you, they deal with you. When you move into Asia, it's not exactly the same type of system. They are not used to dealing with women. And I do not think when we were divesting the business that there was one single solitary woman on their side acquiring the business, yet on our side divesting the business, our general counsel. So it's very interesting when you see how you're doing business with these people, and they actually, sometimes they find it very difficult to deal with you and to ask you questions. Most of the time, I would have to say during due diligence, they would call me Miss Joanne, and that was what I was called. I don't think I was ever called that when I had dealings with one of their competitors, which is where we sold another piece of the business, which was with the Swedish company Volvo. So it's always interesting how you're treated. You have to accept their cultural differences. So when you go into a particular country, you have to make sure you know that you're not getting them upset in any way, mean, or form. And I must admit, when we were doing business with one of the companies, I would take the back step to one of the guys that actually worked for me, because he seemed to be able to make greater strides. And sometimes you do that. But sometimes you have to know when to do that to get the deal done.
So I spent 18 months working in Munich, Germany with Ernst & Young. So we have a program called Global Exchange, and because I worked on a large global account in the U.S., I had the opportunity to go and be embedded with that audit team in Germany as well, and then participated in several smaller engagements through that German office. I spent 18 months working closely with German colleagues, switched back and forth sometimes between German and English depending on whether I was working internally or externally. One of the things I think Joanne mentioned is understanding the cultural context that you work in, and that sometimes can be a challenge. I had done study abroad in Germany when I was in university and thought that I was very aware of what German culture was about. I had lived with a German family and spent 4 months really engaged in that culture. Being a student and being a professional were very different things for me. And so understanding how I was perceived by the people that I was working for was something that was really important for me to become successful. In Germany, one of the biggest challenges for me was getting used to being very direct in my communication style. So even in the US, I consider myself to be a fairly direct person when I communicate, but direct by US standards is not direct by German standards. So it's really important to understand how you're heard and how you're perceived, and that for me was one of the biggest challenges.
Like Andrea, I also spent a little over 2 years in Germany working in Düsseldorf, and when I was sitting in your shoes, I had wanted to do a study abroad program, but because I changed my major, I wasn't able to fit into that 4-year program. So it was a career goal from the time I got out of school. I would say my biggest challenges when I was overseas was really the language, because the office that I worked for said that they really wanted me to speak German all the time. And I went there with no German. It was a baptism by fire, but it was an excellent experience being forced in that situation, especially if you're not stronger in languages, because it makes you realize you can learn a language, you can adapt. And you realize, why would another country speak a different language? We wouldn't accept that here if someone wanted to speak Spanish to us. So it was really interesting to be thrown into that type of situation and see how you can thrive and survive. The one thing I would add is that at the time that I went, I had wanted to go when I was younger, but because of several reasons, it turned out that I went when I had a little bit more experience. And I think that was really good because I felt comfortable in the job that I was doing, and that helped a lot in dealing with language and the cultural differences that you deal with. And I also moved over 10 days after September 11th. So it was a very interesting time to be overseas. As an American and dealing with all that was going on in the world.
Hi, I'm Roseann. First, I'll just give a very brief update on what my group does. It's not simple to understand. When you see investor solutions, you're probably like, what does that mean? Barclays Capital, I'm not sure if you're aware of what the company is, but it's an investment bank, very similar to Merrill Lynch, UBS. We're one of the top investment banks globally. And a couple of years ago, we bought Lehman Brothers after they went through bankruptcy. The sales team I support actually distributes structured products. What that means is, I don't know if you had any classes about corporate bonds, equities. You might be familiar with very simple corporate bonds issued by IBM, standard corporations. What Barclays does is we actually issue very complex, I would say, note derivative products. We take a look at the investor's needs. We sell to mutual funds, insurance companies. We deal with many clients, pension funds. But what we do is we look at what the client's needs are. And the sales team that we support actually structures very complex securities to meet those clients' needs, a lot of times for hedging purposes. So our team does deal cross-asset in equities, FX, commodities, really all asset classes. It's a distribution team as far as selling products out to the market. What my team does is really an operations middle office function. We do everything, I would say, from soup to nuts. They decide on what product they're going to distribute, but we take it all the way from the start all the way to the end. There's this whole complex world in investment banking that going to college, I know I didn't learn about it. As far as what happens in investment banks. You learn how a product is priced or how it's kind of broken out, but I don't think that, at least I didn't have the experience in college of what actually happens to make that product work in the systems. And it's not easy, it's complicated. It's not as simple as booking a trade in the system and then everything happens magically. There's this whole process in the back and behind the scenes with many, many people making the process work, making sure regulatory requirements are being met, making sure trades are going to settle on time, making sure client accounts are getting set up on time. So that's what our team does, is we make sure that whole process from beginning to end is getting done properly and on time, without any errors. So my team, actually, I was the first person to, back in 2004, I was the only person in my team in the US. Little by little, I started taking ownership of more functions, and actually in the US, structured products was, we never issued structured products back in 2004. It was the first time we'd be doing it. That's when I started to get involved, and little by little I figured out the process. I started building out a team. Now the team in the US is about 20 people. Then about, I would say last year, I got my role expanded as far as building out a team globally into Europe and Asia. So now I have a team located in 7 different cities. We are in Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Paris, Frankfurt, London, New York. And basically it's a sales support team that manages the sales team globally around the world. With my experience, I didn't really work abroad as far as being there for months. What I do is manage a team there. And with that I had to, but in building a team in these different cities, I had to go and travel there to some of them. And actually look at what the requirements were of the sales teams, build a team from scratch. There's different regulatory requirements that had to be adhered to. And the one thing I would say as far as culture that I learned while traveling is it is quite different from the US. First of all, the employment law is different. When you take a look at the US, a lot of the employment here is at will. So an employer could fire you for whatever reason. But in other countries, it's actually a lot more strict. In Germany, sometimes it could take 2 years to get somebody fired. So the employment law is very different in other countries. The other thing to share with you is when I went to Japan, I would just use as an example, is the culture there is also, the communication style is very different. So as you can see, I talk very fast. I'm from the New York area, and I have a lot of energy, and I talk rapidly. So sometimes, when I went to Japan, somebody sat with me and said, okay, when you talk to people in Japan, number one, you gotta slow down. You gotta, because first of all, there's a language barrier. But not only that, even for Japanese people talking to each other, it's not the same as it works in New York. There's actually a big gap between one person talking and the next person talking. So it's almost like here in New York when you're talking to somebody, if the next person doesn't quickly respond back to you, you almost think that, maybe they don't understand what I'm saying, maybe I need to keep on talking, right? In Japan, it's almost like when you talk, you should pause and wait for that person to respond to you because they're actually thinking about what you're saying and digesting it, and then they respond back to you. So just before you continue to talk and go on, there's that different communication style. Very different than Latin America, right? People will talk over each other. It's just accepted by that culture. Very different in Japan. Also with business cards. You would never think this is the case, but you see in the US, you get a business card, you look at it quickly, you put it in your pocket. If you were to do that in the Japanese business culture, they would take that as a huge disrespect. That whatever they have on that business card is their career. That's documented on their business card. So when you take the business card from the person, you're actually supposed to look at it, read it, and put it down on the table in front of you. You don't put it in your pocket. And even if you're meeting with 4 different people, you also put it in order of who's the highest rank. So let's say you have a person you're meeting with a director, another person is an associate. You put the director's business card at the top of the list and the associate at the bottom. Different things that we don't have in this culture, right, in the US. Another thing is even when you go into a meeting, they always tend to put the person that's at the head of the group, the person with the biggest title, towards the far end. The people with the lower ranks go towards the door. So it's just very different. And even when going out for dinner, it just works different as far as the person at the head of the group would sit at the far end of the table and things like that. In Europe, I think the one thing to share there is when building a relationship, they do like to go out to coffee. In the U.S., it's very, you go into a meeting room, hi, how are you, and you get right into the business. In Europe, I found that building that relationship and just going out to coffee, and it's a little bit more personal. It helps you kind of break the ice. It's a great thing, right? It's something that we should do more often here, but it's not really done. We're so busy and we just have to get right to it. But in Europe, they have just a different way of handling things. Building that relationship, face to face, it's a lot more personal.
Do you find that the firms that you've worked for prepare you for that to some degree, but a lot of it is learning on, basically as you go? And then secondly, is it not just the work that you have to get used to in an international environment, it's also the living that you have to get used to as well, and the challenges that presents?
I won't speak about the living because I never lived there, but about as far as do corporations teach you that? In my case, they didn't. Some of it's just learned on the way. But before I went to Japan, I was really nervous, so I asked my boss who had been there for some tips before I went. And these are the types of things I learned from him. But I think you learn them as you go. Right now you're learning. And as you move forward in your career, you're going to learn also.
Yeah, I would say at the time I went, I was the first person going to Germany, and most of the people had gone over to the UK, so I really didn't have anyone to give me any kind of tips about what I could expect. I tried to read some of the books, which I did find that some of the things were useful, but a lot of it you just learn as you go. But as far as living there, one of the misconceptions I had was they said, you're going to be in a corporate apartment for the first 6 weeks. So I had in my mind this luxurious, nice place to stay. And as it turned out, it was this one room place with a kitchenette on the side. There was no phone and there was no internet. And for the first 6 weeks, I was actually taking language school. So that was a little bit of a shock to feel, one, you're physically removed from everybody, but then you don't have any connection. And we take that for granted here, that we're so connected. And just, being forced to, from the beginning, go to a grocery store and try to figure out what you're going to buy, and having all these people speaking to you in another language. It was a really big culture shock, I guess, in the first couple months. But I would say after the first 6 months, you feel settled, and you feel more confident. But I think what's key when you go to a non-English speaking country is to learn the language as best as you can, because even if you don't need it for your job you're going to, it's going to make your everyday life so much easier to get to know the language as best as you can.
Yeah, so my situation was a little different because Ernst & Young has an established program that I was part of. We did a 3-day cultural training about 3 months before we went on assignment. I also, like I mentioned before, lived abroad in Germany, so I had some sense of the cultural context that I was going to be in. But you can't replace classroom learning with on-the-ground actual interactions with people. So someone can tell you that Germans are more direct, but having an interaction while you explain to your staff that you would prefer that they would document something in a different way, and watching them completely ignore what you said until you say, no, that was wrong, we need to do it differently. That's an actual contextual example of learning that it's more direct and you're not heard unless you're painfully direct in some cases. So I think that cultural training can help, and I had some of that, but it's definitely your personal interactions with people, as always, even in the US. You know, we have very different regional cultures here. Living in Philadelphia is different than living on the West Coast. So as you experience working and interacting with people in university that have different cultural backgrounds than you, you'll become aware of being aware of that cultural context and different cultural cues that people use. So that's a really important skill to build now, so that when you have these opportunities later in your career, that you're prepared for that. The personal side of my experience in Germany was fantastic. I had the opportunity to bring my husband with me, and I had my son while I was there. So personally, I also got to experience the German healthcare system, which was an interesting experience in and of itself. I think when you're in these opportunities, your experience is enhanced by your ability to make connections with local people. So when you're on an expat assignment, a lot of times you'll have a community of other expatriates, those people not from that country that are working in. But it's important to seek out locals and build those relationships as well, because you'll experience the culture and the country in a completely different way than you will when you're traveling with a bunch of Americans or a bunch of English-speaking Europeans. So that was an important component of my experience. I had a friend that had been an exchange student and stayed with my family in the US when I was in high school. So I maintained contact with her, spent holidays with her and her husband. She has a daughter who's like a month and a half younger than my son. I went and visited my host family from when I was in university several times, and I also made an effort to use my German and speak with local Germans, go out and experience the culture and it really enhanced that experience for me. So I now am looking for the next opportunity to go abroad, whether it's Germany or somewhere else.
It's interesting because I didn't have any cultural background when I went. It was, where is the deal? It was what we were interested in, and a bolt-on acquisition here, and that's basically where I went. So the idea is, I've been to the UK, I've been to Ireland, I've done deals there. It's a lot easier in an English-speaking country, basically for a lot of the reasons that everybody's talked about. First of all, the papers in front of you are in English. You can read, you can do your due diligence, and you can also pick up on a lot more. You can go to the grocery store, and you can read everything. The time we were in, the last location that wasn't English speaking was Italy, and we spent a lot of time there, and we were in a small town. It was a family-run business we were buying. It was, one of our products from Ingersoll Rand is Schlag Lock, and we were buying a European lock, family-owned business. And it was in this small town. Most of the people in the town did not speak English. When you go to Bologna, Milan, some of these larger cities, you're going to find people are bilingual. But we were in a small town. And you go into the grocery store, as they said, the first time you're in there, you're like, oh, how do I do this? But I had more problems with getting my clothes dry cleaned, which you paid up front, and then you had this card, and it just came down this chute. But the first time I did it, I had no idea what I was doing. It was like the first time you saw one of those Muni things in New York City, and you're putting, like, how do I do this, and how do I pay with my credit card? But you get over it. You kind of try and talk to people and make friends and do other things. Well, I made friends with one of the local, there was a restaurant called Tiffany's, a family-run business in this town, and the guys that were working with me all laughed at me because there was a daughter, and she wanted to learn how to speak English. Now, I had minored in college in Spanish. In Italy, Italian and Spanish, yeah, some of the words are close. But by the time I finished, I could read and I could speak enough to be cordial and get along with her and everything else. And I didn't go to any classes. But her family found out that this was probably going to be the last time I was going to be over there, because the whole business was now incorporated and I had completed my job. And they presented me, I was at dinner with a whole bunch of people, and they gave me one of their bottles of limoncello that their family had made. And they wrote me a thank you note in English, which they had come a long way because she would teach me, I would teach her. It was funny though, because it was one of the restaurants in town, and they used to have lots of long lines to get to it. But if I was online, whether it was the father or the daughter, they would wave to me, and I would go around back whoever I was with. And as long as we had this English-Italian lesson during the course of dinner when they served us, we skipped the whole line. So when they say get to know the local people, it was the best experience of my life. I would have never known Italian or anything like that. And I enjoyed it tremendously. And she would, you know, there were a few other things we were looking for. And we'd go to dinner, specifically go there sometimes, just to find out where could we do X. If we want to go away for this weekend, how can we get here or there? And they're, you know, half English, half Italian. We got along and we did very well through the whole thing. And it was a great experience. It was a very good experience, but it takes time. And the grocery store and simple things that you don't really think about. If you're in a non-English speaking country, it becomes, you know, different. Paris is another one. France, when you're in, you know, okay, now what's the sign for that? You know, and you've got to work your way around. And if you're there to work, you are there working. I don't do too well reading French financial statements, though. Spanish, Italian, and German, I do okay. For some reason, French, not one of my better languages. So.
Let me open it up to the floor to have questions addressed to our panelists.
I have a question. Do you think it's easy? Do you think women have the opportunity these days to work abroad, or it's something you have to look for and something you have to fight for doing? Or do you think it's something that's offered now with so many corporations?
Well, I'll comment at my role. I mean, as far as at my company, Barclays, they're trying to get me to move to London. So I mean, I have not personally felt a difference between being a woman compared to a man. I mean, that's things that my job are pretty. Again, for me, it was just a matter of being from New York compared to being from another country. That was the biggest difference for me. It wasn't because I was a woman. And the offers, the opportunities at the company, as far as working in another country, are the same for a woman than for anybody. A lot of time it comes down to your experience. If there's an opening in a different country where a role is most needed. But I didn't feel being a woman was a barrier to that, or be a roadblock to that happening.
I would echo that as well. I mean, I think at Ernst & Young, one of the things we're talking about is, you know, as the economy globalizes, our company has to globalize as well, and that means our workforce has to globalize, and that's gender neutral. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, we have to learn how to build global relationships and work comfortably in all cultures, and part of that is having these experiences where you're working abroad. I think what is required is that whether you're male or female, that you're highly competent, you're respected in your local office. If you're good at what you do, if you're a hard worker, people will invest in you. And sending you on a global assignment is making an investment in your professional future. So you have to show them that that's a worthwhile investment to make by being a highly respected employee. I think the other piece of it is, no matter what it is that you want in your career, you have to let people know where you want to go and what do you want to do. If you don't advocate for your own path in your career, you're not going to make it any further. So it doesn't matter, that's gender neutral again. It's about being clear about what your intentions are, where you want to go, and finding the people that will be on your team and helping you achieve that next step or that next role or the next opportunity.
I would say we've come a long way. You know, when I first started out, and I worked for Ernst & Young, and there was only one woman partner when I started with Ernst & Young many moons ago. And one of the first part-time partners was a woman who worked for me after I left. But part of the reason I left Ernst & Young was I didn't, at that point in time, I was traveling approximately 50% of my time for them. I had fairly large clients, and I couldn't balance. I couldn't figure out how I was going to balance having a child and having a career. So I bailed because basically I could go to work for Ingersoll Rand, and one of the things I had talked to them, and the reason they broached me was because their CFO was friends with one of the partners I was working for there, Ernst & Young. And he said she's struggling with this idea of she wants to have a career, but she also wants to have a child. So I went, I met with them, and they were looking at that point in time for a manager of technical accounting, and it was fairly close to home, so I could balance the two. But over time and everything else, you know, Ernst & Young has come a long way. They have one of the best programs, you know, for women in general. I mean, I'm very active. They have a program for alumni women out of New York that I belong to that we meet usually twice a year. But then they also have a fairly strong alumni association. From Price Waterhouse, most of the people Teresa works with, that she just started working with the one particular group, they were all women that I work with all the time. You know, so it's interesting. Things have radically changed. My answer to you 20 years ago would be entirely different. You can do whatever you want, but you have to do it, and you have to be committed to do it, and do the best job you can.
Just as a recruiter, so it's a different firm, KPMG. I think too, it's to your point about whatever's open, just structure it out. Like have these 2-3 year goals, because yeah, these women are very successful, but like you said, there still comes a time, even though all the doors are open for you, that you'll have to find that life balance if you decide to have kids. So a lot of women, I see it, KPMG and the other firms, kind of stay in maybe the senior management role because it fits their schedule, whereas some people still are at a partner level. Christine Parker from KPMG is out here a lot, she's a Villanova alum. She has a good family balance because she lives near family, so she has that opportunity to be partner. So it comes all with all these different facets, but if you kind of structure out your career path as you go, like every 2 years this is your goal, 3 years, 5-year goal, I think you can accomplish what all these great ladies have accomplished.
I mean, I would say at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I mean, there's definitely the same opportunities whether a man or a woman. And I know just in the time I've been working, I've seen a lot of advances. I'll be out of Villanova 20 years, and I've seen major advances from when I started to now. And we have 4 kids with a 5th on the way, and I'm still moving up the ladder. I've not been stopped in my career. But the one thing was I knew that working abroad for me personally was a major goal of mine. So the one thing I think you do have to be patient with is it might not happen the exact time that you want it to happen. You might have to wait a year or 2. But I definitely think in our business it differentiates you. And most of the people that I work with at my level have worked abroad for some period of time. And then as far as working with clients abroad and working internationally, we all do that. So.
Is it important as well to stay connected with the folks back in the States so that you can transition back here to Philadelphia, New York? Or
I can speak to that. I mean, one of the things for me while I was on assignment, I was gone for 18 months. And one of the things that people are challenged with when you're on an assignment that is that long is to maintain that connection. So for me, I maintained at least monthly communications with my career counselor here in the U.S. in Philadelphia. I made sure that at least every 2 months I was contacting a partner here in Philadelphia, just, hey, here's what I'm doing this month, here's what's going on, I traveled to this cool place, it was awesome, how are things going for you? Just so that they remembered who I was. Because if you're not in front of them physically, if they're not seeing your face on a regular basis, it's pretty easy for people to forget about who you are or that you're still part of the office. So that is something that you really have to commit yourself to, and it's at all levels. We have instant messaging, and so I would constantly, hey, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Germany, you're just getting in, how's it going? And so you have to maintain those relationships. So much of your success in your career is going to be about your ability to build and maintain quality relationships with people, and that's whether you're on assignment, that's whether it's the people that work with you in your office, it's the people that you network with at events like this. So those skills are going to serve you well.
Just a bit of advice for me as far as, I heard before, I think Andrea said it, own your career. Extremely important is you could actually move your career in the direction that you want. So even if you take a job just to get your foot in the door, you have to, once you get your foot in the door, make sure, number 1, that you're aware of how to do really good in that job. what is the end goal? Your boss or 2 levels up, what are they interested in? Is it making money? Is it controls? Is it improving client service? Is it operational efficiency? So if you know exactly what the guys at the top are looking for from you, make sure, number one, you keep track of what you do. They always keep in mind, have your marketing page. One side of your marketing page is what am I responsible for in my job? What are you doing for that? But on the other side of your marketing page, your page, is what are you doing above and beyond? What are you doing above and beyond? And again, looking at the goals of that group. They're looking for certain things. Well, just because you're as an analyst in that job doesn't mean you can't actually drive change. You can think out of the box and have, this is all about empowerment. Having the, realizing that you can actually make it, you're not just in the door to do a job. Always understand what you're doing. Ask questions. Don't be shy. And be confident. So a lot of things is, just so that you know, is actually I run a team with 50 people globally. My boss is a male, and he has 7 other direct reports that are males. Well, he might be looking to do something different, and he might, he always looks at me as his takeout, not the guys in the group. It's me. And by the way, I have 2 kids. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I work at home 2 days a week. I have off on Fridays. And this is not something that companies usually do, not even mine. But because I've built the experience. I've been very, whatever the goals were for the department, I've met those and gone way above and beyond. So when you prove yourself and you show that they can trust you, it goes a long way. And again, it's all about confidence. To be very clear, when you have conversations throughout the day, your managers are, they have an eye on you. They know exactly what kind of work you're putting in. And maybe they don't. I mean, they might not be aware of every single little thing that you do, but that's why you have to keep track of it. And also be proactive. Set up meetings with them, right? Maybe set up a monthly one-to-one. If they're not meeting with you, you be the one to reach out. And that proactive nature, they're going to say, wow, this person really gets it.
Other questions?
I did my undergrad here at Villanova, and I'm back here again for my MBA. I did several study abroad experiences while I was here, and I was hoping that would look good to the companies that I would eventually look at. But did you find that having gone to Germany as an undergrad, put your language skills aside, that's obviously a huge asset, but did they automatically have your name circling around to go to Germany because, oh, she's lived there before, kind of a thing? Because I'm hoping to bank on I lived in England and Spain and Italy, so I was hoping that would help.
So the program that I participated in, it's a competitive application process within the firm, and I think it's not necessarily that when I was hired, they suddenly circled and starred my name and put me on a short list for global assignments, but part of having that experience was I sought those out, and I made sure that everybody that I worked with, the managers that were a part of the team for my career development, that everybody knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And I made sure that I got on jobs that were global organizations, so it was building that case for me to go abroad. So then when I submitted my application, I could go back and say, hey, I've lived in this country before, I understand that cultural context, I have those language skills, might not be perfectly fluent, and I'm not going to write a perfect 14-page German memo, but I can get around, and I feel very comfortable in that context. So it's not that it necessarily automatically diverted me there, but I know that it's something, and as I interview, it's something that I look at in applicants is, what are their experiences abroad, and talking about that. What has your experience been? What did you learn from that experience? Because every day our culture and our business organizations become more global. So your ability, whether you've traveled abroad, lived abroad, or you have a network of international friends, it's about learning how to work with people that have a different cultural context than you do. So those skills are important, whether you want to go on global assignment or not, but it's certainly something that will help you make that case as to why you'll be a great candidate to invest in for that opportunity.
I love Co-Secret. Co-Secret is like the creepy twisted operation.
What was the best or most important thing you took from your abroad experience, whether it was actually living there or working there? I had to say, this was it, this is what I gained. And then I guess the second question, financially, is it, particularly if you spend some time there, is it, and I don't want to do the quotes, but is it worth it? Is it kind of a financial thing?
I mean, for me, when visiting other countries or visiting my peers or other people I work with, it's one thing talking to somebody over the phone, but when you go there and meet people in person, I don't have to be there, all the time to live there and work next to them. Once I build that initial relationship with them, when I come back to the U.S. and I talk to them, I feel like I know them. It's a little bit different when you meet somebody in person, so that's something I've taken. Also, nowadays technology is great. You can have video conference calls. So sometimes we have meetings in the U.S. that have 4 cities on the video conference, and we can see everybody on the video. So it's a great thing to do as far as if you're looking to build relationships, even if you're working in the U.S., if you're looking to maybe go into another country, or you're talking to somebody over the phone there, maybe setting up a video conference, seeing them face to face, because it kind of changes things.
I think one of the best things I took away from it was I wanted to make the most of the time I was there. So if there was any opportunities to go anywhere in Germany or another country, I took advantage of it. So essentially I just traveled the entire time I was there, which I look back on that time now and I think that was such a great time. Just to get the cultural awareness, the business experience. I spent time in Greece and Hungary, UK, all over Western Europe and Africa. So I think too, while you're there, you don't have to be absorbed in that particular country. You can take, if your role allows it, to take advantage of that. And I think as far as the financial aspects, for me personally at the time, the firm I was working for didn't think it was the right career time for me, but personally it was a good time for me. So I took a little bit of a cut at the time going over, but in the long run it's definitely helped me many times over as far as like differentiating itself in further moves. I would say by far it's the best thing that I've done professionally.
So I'd say there are 2 pieces. Personally, absolutely, the travel aspect was phenomenal. I could have traveled every weekend if I wanted to, and there were sometimes you just want to stay in the city that you're in, so you can enjoy that too. But that personal piece of just being able to experience and see so many different things that you don't have the opportunity to when you're here. Professionally, I think it's the network of people that I met and built relationships with. So now, when I have a contract that's in French and I need to find someone in the Paris office, I met someone when I was doing work in Dusseldorf that was from Paris, that had done a rotation there. So now I have a contact and I have a way of finding a path there. So it's not that I just have a network of people in Germany, but I have a network of people that spreads all over Europe and Africa, and that's been invaluable to me, and I'm sure it will continue to expand, or I hope that it will. In terms of if it's worth it, it was absolutely worth it for me. I went at the perfect time from a currency perspective, so it worked out really well.
See, I still travel extensively. I chair most of our benefit committees worldwide. So in addition to mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures, that's one segment of my job. My other job works with HR, and I'm not really quite sure how I morphed into this over time, but I ended up chairing most of our benefit committees worldwide. So the idea is I do travel. Like I spent the month of June pretty much on the road, going and attending all the different meetings. When I don't attend, we do them by video conference, sometimes by just regular phone calls, because we all know one another. You have a certain group of trustees, it's the same people. There's no, you know exactly what everybody's going to say, everybody gets used to one another. But when we do have face-to-face meetings like I did in June, and I did a tour of Europe, I went to all the different things, I went to work councils in different countries, I met with them, where we're just usually talking by video or by phone. It's great because you need that interaction face to face. So I still to this day do a lot of travel from that standpoint. But I traveled when my kids were younger, thankfully, partially to my husband, who's a Villanova graduate. But he was great with respect to the whole thing. As long as I pre-planned to the best of my ability, my schedule. We had a nanny, and we had one nanny that was with my kids for 13 years. She stayed with us. So we had a phenomenal situation where it was a great work-life balance. And after that, we had think we only had 3 in the entire lives of my kids. My youngest is a freshman year now. So they had 3 nannies in their entire life. So it worked out very well. But I mean, I did have to plan exactly what I did. But I would go off. I'd be gone in Italy or Ireland or, you know, different places doing deals, even in the United States, you know, going off. But I planned it, you know, and you had to work it. So there is that work-life balance. But you said your, you know, that whole idea, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And you know, when you go abroad and everything else, the culture, the language, it's up to you to take the initiative to learn it. If I can speak Italian, and I've never been to a class in Italian, you can do it too. So, you know, you learn when you're there and pick it up as long as you absorb it all and take everything in. And I do travel. If I am there for 2 to 3 weeks at a clip without coming back to the States, I always spend my weekends traveling, and I love that time. I think the only person that doesn't like it is my husband, who said, "You've been to where? You did what?" You know, and I think he claims now. He goes, you know, he couldn't come in June because he was working on a different project. He claims the next time that I go off, he's going to take vacation and come with me so that I don't go off and do these different things without him the next time. So it's kind of like totally come around. But to tell you the truth, if they offered me a 6-month assignment overseas in different places, I'd jump at the chance.
It is, women, you know, we know that we're uniquely challenged. You know, the opportunities are there, but we're uniquely challenged because we still have to create that work-life balance. I know just getting my husband to pick up a pizza tonight so I can be here tonight is a challenge. But I'd like to thank our panelists and thank you for participating in our
Actually, we wish you all the best.
Yeah.